Dollar, dollar, dollar. Dirt and money, no soul. Had to go and get it, ain't no time to kick it. Got a stack and flip for my foes. Dollar, 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 dollar. Please tell me you can hear me. Don't turn your back and don't neglect me. Just let me know if you need me. Dollar, 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 dollar. Let me watch out for my partners. Keep my money long, get my team strong. Let me run away from my problems.
Yup, what's good, original crew, man? We're back. We have the darkest moments in TV history. That's different. Normally we are doing the darkest moments. You know what I'm saying? With this being the darkest moment, too. Hey, when you get a whole, that says a lot. That speaks a lot of volume, don't it, see?
Yeah.
Hey, man. So with that being said, shout out to Nick Crowley for another visual.
Always.
You dig?
Yeah.
But make sure you check out the links in the description box.
Down below.
You already know where to go, man. Go over there to the Extra Dose. Hey, there's some content over there that you do not see over here on this channel that lives over there. Also, some content we used to do that y'all might be looking for is now over there, like the Sunny V2 and those type of videos. Y'all go over there to the Extra Dose. Also, check out the Patreon. We got exclusive content that you will not see on YouTube. If we post it on Patreon, not posting on YouTube unless it's a censorship thing, you know.
Yeah.
Other than that, we'll post it, you know what I'm saying? But with that also being said, if you enjoyed today's visuals,
like it with a thumbs up.
man, y'all run us up, man. We're trying to hit 200,000 by the end of the summer, man. We need your help to be able to do that, man. So please continue to run us up, man. We appreciate it. But with that being said, let's go ahead and get into it. Let's check it out. Let's see what the darkest moment in TV history is. Let's go.
Bom dia, Mariana. O quarteirão continua todo cercado por policiais militares. Nós estamos afastados por orientação da polícia. Deste ponto aqui, é possível avistar apenas a janela onde, neste momento, o rapaz se encontra com as duas adolescentes.
It's Tuesday, October 14th, 2008. As television crews arrive on the scene of an unfolding news event occurring in Sao Paulo, Brazil, a camera is trained up at the third-story apartment unit where two young girls are being held captive. The ordeal was already developing into one of the longest hostage situations the area had ever seen, as it now entered its 18th grueling hour. However, there was optimism at the time, as negotiations between the hostage taker and law enforcement were ongoing, and the local news station speculated that they would soon be covering a peaceful resolution to this episode, though they couldn't have been more wrong. Instead, this single news report was merely the first domino to fall, leading to a chain reaction unlike anything we've ever seen in the world of television, as little did this news station and all the others en route to cover this impasse know, but they would have a say in how this story ends. This is the story of the Eloa Pimentel hostage incident, or as it's since come to be known, the darkest moment in television history.
Vou aproveitar esse momento que a gente sabe que os três estão assistindo. Lindenberg, somos um amigo da família.
Eu queria falar com a minha mãe que eu amo ela. E meu pai também.
It was a warm, muggy Monday afternoon. Most residents across Sao Paulo had been busy starting off their work week as 15-year-old Eloa Cristina Pimentel arrived home from school for the day. Best described as a fun-loving, good-natured kid, Eloa excelled in her studies, where she met her closest friend, Nayara de Silva. And as she entered her family's apartment that day, she did so with Nayara by her side, as well as two other male friends, Legaio Viala de Oliveira and Victor de la Compass, with a group gathering together to work on a school project, until they heard the sound of rustling at the door. By this point, Eloa's parents Ana and Aldo had been busy at work, while her brother Douglas had stayed after school, meaning that the sound they had just heard couldn't have come from either of them, with Eloa's confusion quickly turning to fear as the door was pushed in and then broke completely open, revealing the source of the sound. Standing there was 22-year-old Lindenberg Fernandez Alves, a man who Eloa had come to know all too well. Almost 3 years before, the then 12-year-old Eloa had caught the eye of Lindenberg, who at that time was already 19 years old. Though despite this glaring age gap, the two would fall in love with each other and proceed to date for the next 2 years and 7 months. A period of time that was anything but smooth sailing. By this point, Lindenberg had become well known locally for his temper, with most describing him as a hothead and incredibly aggressive, which Eloa would come to realize firsthand, as he quickly grew jealous of seemingly anything and everything Eloa would do without him. On one occasion, Lindenberg had even stalked Eloa when she was out for a walk, following her every movement across town before he'd eventually catch her sitting alone at the bus stop. This, for whatever reason, enraged him, and he would go on to confront her both verbally and physically, with it being reported that Lindenberg had attacked her not only on this occasion, but likely on several others as well. And after over 2.5 years of dating, Eloa had finally had enough, recognizing that Lindenberg couldn't be fixed, or at least not by her, and so she broke up with him. But this was something that Lindenberg just couldn't accept, as in his mind, life without Eloa was no life at all, and he had to do something about it. Now, Lindenberg stood in the doorway facing the girl who had broke his heart just months before, with his pistol pointed directly at her. Eloa immediately screamed, but was silenced by Lindenberg, who slapped her across the face, before going on to express frustration towards the other 3 in the group as they weren't supposed to be there. They were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, and yet he claimed that this would not spare them from his wrath. He was there to kill Eloa and himself, and anyone else who might stand in his way.
Wow.
Though he seemed to be in no rush to do so, as he forced the 4 teenagers onto a bed and forbade any of them from talking, before he would stand there and wait for hours weighing his options. Until he too heard the sound of rustling at the door. It was Aldo, Eloa's father, who had arrived home from work only to find Eloa's brother Douglas sitting outside the front door. Douglas had gotten home over an hour before, only to find the door locked and the inside deathly quiet, forcing him to wait for his father to arrive home with the keys, all the while having no inclination that inside, his own sister was being held at gunpoint. As Aldo approached the door, Lindenberg would begin yelling, shouting at him to back away, and that he had his daughter and her friends inside, marking the official beginning of the standoff. Police would arrive almost immediately to the scene, where they would quickly realize just how daunting the task before them was. Lindenberg was more unwell than they could have ever imagined, with his temper proving to be their biggest obstacle during that first day, as in some instances he was actually receptive to negotiations, even allowing the release of the 2 boys inside, before he would suddenly shut down and become enraged, seemingly out of nowhere.
What?
Nothing. I'm just wrapping my head around everything.
Oh, my bad, y'all.
He shut down and become enraged, seemingly out of nowhere.
O que você quer? Fala pra mim pra eu poder te ajudar, cara.
Eu quero matar Eloá e matar e liberar a base. Eu só acredito na minha namorada, essa desgraçada aqui. Qual é a mulher? Cala a boca.
At one point, he even fired a shot through the front door at a passing civilian, incorrectly believing that they were trying to interfere. One minute he was hot, and the next he was cold. And as these tense minutes turned to hours, the reality of the situation for these negotiators became apparent. One wrong statement, even one wrong word, could cause everything to come crashing down. It was a fragile ordeal, and the following day, these negotiations would only become more complicated.
E a gente vai falar agora de um caso de violência que está acontecendo neste momento em Santo André, no ABC Paulista. Um jovem mantém a ex-namorada e a amiga dela reféns.
A polícia cercou o conjunto habitacional onde estão os reféns e a repórter Graciela Andrade está lá no local. Conta pra gente qual é a situação nesse momento, Graciela.
During the local 7 a.m. news that following morning, the first reporter would arrive to the scene to document this developing story. In the footage, we can see the massive police presence and the window of the apartment where Lindenberg was holding the 2 girls. And almost immediately, the story was met with a skyrocketing number of viewers and soaring ratings that producers could only dream of. With this single report, they had just struck television gold, and suddenly other stations and dozens of reporters began flocking to the scene to capture a piece of this unfolding drama in real time. It seemed like in an instant, all of Brazil was now tuned into their TVs and waiting to see what would happen next. And among those viewers was Lindenberg himself.
that's the reason why it's a blessing and a curse with the news, bro.
Yeah.
Because now I have eyes out there. I see what's going on. I see the information that they feeding y'all, and you know what I'm saying?
And in a situation like this, if you say something I don't like or tick
Yeah.
them off, like you don't know,
You should have, like, sometimes, bro,
I'm
like,
just gonna react.
I understand y'all wanna be reporting on it, informing, but also it's like, proceed with caution, though.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? With all of it, like my mom was saying the other day, like, oh, why they? I said, bro, the news ain't trying to spread the good news. Like, what? Like, you got to be delusional to think the news is gonna spread the good news. Nobody tunes into the good news.
Yeah.
Like he just said, they struck gold by this whole ordeal. Ratings are through the roof. Advertisement dollars are going up because now we have something going. You know what I'm saying? So people want to tune in to be nosy. Everybody in the world is nosy, like everyone. So everyone is wanting to find out what's going on. They want to be, and he's being nosy in the inside because he doesn't know exactly what's going on. He can only talk to the, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
To the detectives and stuff. Like, it's sad, bro.
Recognizing that the news was starting to take note of his story, and that the area was now swarming with cameras waiting on his every move, Lindenberg's behavior began to grow more erratic. At one point, he forced Aloha to the window, standing behind her and demanding that she give the cameras a thumbs up, in order to let the people at home know that she was okay, and that Lindenberg wasn't hurting her. Though soon after, he would approach another window, this time holding his revolver, and without warning, begin firing randomly at the street below, in the direction of the news crews. Thankfully, again, no one was hurt by these shots, but it was becoming evident that Lindenberg was almost putting on a show for the cameras. And now that he was feeling like the star of the show, he was growing less and less interested in working with negotiators. And they recognized this.
That's another thing when it comes down to the news. A lot of criminals and stuff, they want to be publicized. They want to feel like they a star, you know what I'm saying?
I love the attention.
Yeah, and that's another reason why, like, certain crimes happen. They like the attention that they're receiving from it. They like the fear that they putting into people, you know? Like, they feed off that.
He was growing less and less interested in working with negotiators. And they recognized this too, and knew that they had to do something to force Lindenberg to continue working with them, which led to their decision to cut power to the unit, leaving Lindenberg in the dark, without air conditioning, and unable to watch the television.
Eu ligo, mas vamos conversar.
As a result, Lindenberg went ballistic, striking Eloa while on the phone with negotiators. Though despite his initial reaction, this move actually ended up working, as Nayara was eventually released under the condition that the power be restored, which meant that Lindenberg was now down to just one hostage, the person that he had sought out from the very beginning, and the whole reason he was there.
It's still bad, bro, because that's his intended target.
Yeah, so letting the other ones go, I'm glad he did, but
because the reason why you let the guys go, because they're your biggest threat. They can eventually just say, all right, let's muscle up. We can overcome him. So by letting them go first, okay, you eliminate your two biggest threats directly at you. All right. I really ain't got no beef with you. I ain't really got no smoke with you. You just collateral. Because I really ain't got no issue with you.
You ain't got no issue with nobody but yourself.
But
his intended target was...
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so now y'all really got him with who he wants. And unfortunately, she has nobody else there with her.
Yeah.
And sometimes they let people lose hope.
As the sun set on that Tuesday evening and the standoff passed its 40th hour, some remained positive, while others viewed the whole thing as helpless. But whatever opinions those in the area had at the time, it's safe to say that no one could have expected the baffling turn that this case was headed for just the following day. It was 1:30 p.m. on Wednesday the 15th, the third day of Eloa's captivity, when suddenly, inside that quiet apartment building, the silence would be interrupted by the ringing of a telephone. Lindenberg rushed to pick it up, expecting it to be the negotiator who he had been speaking with the previous day, but instead, he heard a different voice.
Lindenberg, tá tudo bem aí?
É.
Ô Lindenberg, somos amigo da família, a gente queria saber se tá tudo bem, só isso. Lindenberg, é Luiz Guerra, tudo bem? Somos conhecidos da...
Luiz Guerra.
Sou da Sônia Abrão, repórter da Sônia Abrão, a gente só tá em nome da sua família, porque sua mãe está desesperada, a gente quer saber se tá tudo bem, só isso.
Acting without the permission of the police or Eloa's family, a reporter named Luis Guerra from the Sonia Abrero news station managed to track down the apartment's phone number and call Lindenberg while in the middle of this active hostage situation.
Oh, for fuck.
Wow. Are you serious?
Story.
Are you serious, bro?
Because everyone wants to be the first and have their name on this big story and that. Like, what's the reason? Like, this is a sensitive, like, situation.
You ain't, honestly, at this point, you ain't shit to do something like that. This is a life or death situation.
Facts.
The only thing you think about is your personal gain.
Yeah. When you're not equipped to, like, actually
handle
handle like a situation like that, or individual in his mental, mind state. Like,
you ain't shit, bro.
Come on now.
Vocês estão ao vivo aí?
Não, estamos gravando e vai ser exibido na Sônia Abrão tudo o que você falar, tudo. Às 2 horas entra no ar, se você estiver falando, vai ficar no ar.
It's not hard to understand why this is such a terrible idea, as we already know that Lindenberg was highly emotional and could be set off on a rampage with just a single word. And yet, Luis had called anyway, and he was clearly unprepared to handle an interview of this magnitude, as he nervously starts by first lying to Lindenberg, claiming to be a friend of his family, before eventually revealing that he was actually a reporter, and that their phone conversation would be played for the world to hear. Throughout this nearly 8-minute-long phone call, Luis would push things further and further, even at one point speaking directly to Eloa.
Alô?
Oi, Eloa, Luiz Guerra da Sônia Abrão, tudo bem?
Quem tá falando?
Luiz Guerra, repórter da Sônia Abrão, tudo bem com você?
Tá tudo tranquilo. Eu quero almoçar.
Você quer almoçar?
Eu tô fraca.
Fica tranquila, eu conversei com o Lindenberg, a gente vai conversar de novo. Ele tá te tratando bem?
Tá me tratando bem.
Who sounds weak and exhausted as she sends a message to her family telling them that she loves them.
Olha, você tá precisando mandar um recado pra sua mãe, alguma coisa?
Eu queria saber como ela tá, como meus familiares estão.
Tá tudo bem com eles, tá tudo tranquilo.
Um beijo da minha mãe pro meu pai.
Pode fazer uma...
Com eles.
Pode falar de novo, mande um beijo de novo.
Eu queria falar pra minha mãe que eu amo ela. Pro meu pai também. Eu amo eles.
And in what might be the worst moment of the entire call, Luis accidentally speaks over her at one point, before his producer clearly tells him to get her to repeat that line, in a shameless attempt at getting a good soundbite for their story.
Tá tudo tranquilo.
Um beijo da minha mãe pro meu pai.
Pode fazer uma...
Com eles.
Pode falar de novo, mande um beijo de novo.
Luis's stunt was indescribably unprofessional, as he had inserted himself into hostage negotiations that he was utterly unprepared to take on. And though his words didn't immediately lead to any escalations from Lindenberg, the effects of this interview were nothing shy of devastating. Just one day prior, Lindenberg had seen his work on TV for the very first time, and now, with this interview, it fully sank in just how important he was. For the first time in his life, all eyes were on him. He was the main character of the biggest story transpiring in all of Brazil. And now, he was inspired to write another chapter. From here, Lindenberg would continue his antics at the window, using these opportunities to interact with the cameras and hold the media's attention, while using Eloa as a human shield to prevent police snipers from firing at him. As at one point, he forces her to use tied-together sheets to lift up food from negotiators below. All the while, he's looming ominously behind her. And this wasn't solely for the cameras either, as by this point, the audience wasn't just watching at home, but many had gathered outside the apartment to watch the action unfold in person, treating it like some sort of public spectacle. And all while this was happening, police were trying desperately to continue their negotiations. But by this point,
y'all smiling, laughing, want to record, man. This girl is miserable. She know, like, at any moment, I can be gone. From my family, from my friends, from my... Man, y'all thinking this is... The world's so sick, bro.
Lindenberg was far too distracted by all this attention, as he would even hop onto another live interview shortly after.
Teus amigos estão dizendo, o pessoal que te conhece também está falando que você sempre foi calmo, sempre foi trabalhador, sempre foi cara legal, que o que você está fazendo hoje deve ser surto que você está passando, uma crise emocional muito séria. Mas você, de qualquer maneira, mesmo em crise, você está se segurando, você está fazendo as coisas com um certo critério, você está liberando as pessoas, você não está fazendo mal para ninguém. Então, já dá final para essa história que seja todo mundo...
Y'all stroking this man ego too much for me, man. This is sad. This is a sad display of broadcasting, journalism. Like, you don't do bull crap. Just so you can say, hey, we got an interview with this guy. For news ratings, man.
São e salvo, inclusive você.
While on air, the host herself didn't just ask Lindenberg questions, but she began actively trying to negotiate Iloa's release, despite again having no authority and no training for this kind of event.
Tá, você vai entregar os 2 revólveres para ela, você vai tirar as balas e entregar na mão da Iloa.
Exatamente, mas eu não vou dar a hora e não vou falar qual vai ser o momento.
Tudo bem, mas você vai descer e a gente vai deixar isso aqui claro para o Brasil inteiro. Você está dizendo que você vai descer desarmado, completamente indefeso, com as mãos para cima. Ou seja, você vai se render sem nenhuma resistência, para que as coisas terminem em paz. É isso? Confirma para a gente, confirma para o Brasil inteiro isso.
Tá confirmado. Na melhor hora eu vou fazer isso.
It was evident from both interviews that these reporters were not taking this case as seriously as they should be, failing to understand just how violent Lindenberg was, and just how quickly he could become enraged. And if it wasn't obvious just how twisted the media's perception of this case had become, they would then go on to air a segment with their trusted legal consultant, who gave his expert opinion on how he believed this case would end.
Ademar Gomes, né? Vamos falar do que espera o Lindenberg aqui fora. Boa tarde, viu, doutora Ademar? Prazer tê-lo aqui novamente. E com a sua experiência nos orientar aí sobre o que vai acontecer daqui para frente, para que a gente possa ter uma ideia.
Bom,
claro.
Eu sou muito otimista, né? Eu espero que isso termine assim em pizza, né? E num casamento futuro entre ele e a namorada apaixonada dele, né?
Certo.
Ele está passando uma fase momentânea, né? Ele também tem perdido a motivação de viver, porque um rapaz jovem, quando se apaixona, muitas vezes se desequilibra, que é o
radicaliza
caso dele.
mesmo, né?
Então, mas isso vai terminar realmente em final feliz, graças a Deus, eu tenho plena certeza.
With the reporter theorizing that this would all end in pizza, with the couple having a meal and reconciling their differences before eventually going on to get married, as this was all just a phase for the young man and his passionate girlfriend. And they somehow made things even worse, as the host would follow this segment up by stating that Lindenberg was still going to have to answer for his crimes, before running down the list of every single charge that he was going to face.
A gente tem informação que ele vai...
Why the fuck would y'all do that? It just keeps getting worse
so
and
like
worse.
mentally unwell to me, because I don't understand what's going on and why y'all think that what y'all are doing and how y'all are handling things is okay for someone in this situation
with that mindset.
Like, are y'all even thinking about her and her getting out safe?
No, because if you notice, the main focus is solely on him.
Are we okay?
Not the victim. Not making sure the victim is safe.
Let's minimize the things that we say and the actions that we take as far as ticking him off.
And saying what's gonna happen.
Do whatever we can to make sure
she ain't trying to marry that fool. She ain't trying to see this fool ever again. They're gonna probably end up married. Like shit, no. She
Vai responder aos crimes de sequestro e invasão de domicílio, disparo e porte ilegal de arma de fogo. Ele deve ter um alívio na pena porque ele não tem antecedentes criminais, ele é réu primário e a pena para sequestro seria de 1 a 3 anos.
This obviously only made the situation even more helpless in Lindenberg's mind, as she was essentially telling him that no matter what happens from here, even if it were to all end peacefully, his life was already essentially over based on the crimes he had already committed. And this wasn't the only thing his TV was telling him. As mentioned previously, these news crews were on the scene 24/7, watching and listening to everything that the police were doing all the while. And as a result, they would overhear officers discussing their plans on how they were going to attempt to end the situation. To which, incredibly, these stations would proceed to air this information in real time, meaning that everything the police were trying to do to help Eloa would be heard by Lindenberg well before they would attempt to carry it out. And he would see it all too, as due to the constant live coverage outside their window, he would be able to see any officer attempting to approach the door or the windows. The media was not only making Lindenberg feel invincible, but they were quite literally making him untouchable, as whenever the police would make plans, he would hear it on the TV and simply adjust his course to ensure that they wouldn't capture him. Whatever the police said and whatever the police did, Lindenberg was watching over them all the while, and so they had to be extra diligent and avoid doing anything rash to keep the situation stable. But as another long day came to an end, and the sun rose on the 4th morning of this ordeal, they would proceed to do the exact opposite. Following her release from the apartment, Nayara had been recovering in private away from the media, trying her best to grapple with the situation that she had just endured, as well as dealing with the fear of what might happen to her closest friend. However, on the morning of Thursday the 17th, a pair of unexpected visitors would arrive at her home. Standing at her door were 2 police officers that had been working Eloa's case, who requested that Nayara come with them in order to help assist with their negotiations. Apparently, that morning, Lindenberg...
Everybody dumb.
Why the hell would you take a victim back to...
Like, what? Are we okay? Oh my gosh,
This shit pissing me off.
It's making me so mad.
Everything's handled completely wrong.
Poorly.
But
nobody got no sense.
I say this, at this point, because of the news and the journalists, the police are desperate to do whatever.
But
don't operate in desperation. Operate in strategy. Get them news reporters. Well, I don't know how they laws work, but get them news reporters up out of there. Set up boundaries. Set up a radius. You cannot come within this, and y'all move. Man.
had agreed to facilitate Eloa's release, but only on the condition that Nayara and Douglas meet the 2 outside of the apartment and walk with them down into police custody. This was due to the fact that Lindenberg had become paranoid of being shot by officers, but having Nayara and Douglas there would essentially provide a shield for him. And so the police agreed. But by this point, Nayara had no idea that this deal had ever been made, and that she was now being driven back to the kidnapping site, where she would soon have to meet her captor face to face yet again.
Wow.
And there was little to no time for her to react upon her arrival, as she was almost immediately thrust into negotiations.
Amor, amor, vou subir. Tá bom, na frente da porta.
Nenhum policial subir, tá bom?
Tá bom.
Nenhum.
Tá, deixa eu falar com ele agora, amor.
Tudo certo.
Vai dar tudo certo, prometi pra você desde o começo, tá bom?
Tá bom.
Beijo, eu te amo.
Oi, Nayara.
Tudo bom?
Tá melhor já?
Tô, você tá calmo aí?
Tudo calmo.
Você vai fazer mesmo tudo isso que você tá falando?
Confia em mim?
Confio.
And so, the cameras followed as Nayara and Douglas began their trek up to the home. Though almost immediately, Lindenberg had a change of heart and began yelling to negotiators that he no longer wanted to do this, as he was nervous about Douglas being there. Instead insisting—
Because Douglas is the dad, right?
Douglas.
Yeah, I think Douglas is Eloa's father.
That Nayara come up to the unit alone, where he would then open the door and she would take Eloa's hand and the 3 would walk out together. Based on this behavior, it was obvious that Lindenberg wasn't to be trusted, as he had already backed off the original deal, Plus, part of his deal was that no police officers would be allowed in the building, meaning that there was no backup for Nayara, making the whole thing far too dangerous to even consider. And yet, the negotiators agreed anyway, and gave Nayara the call to walk up those stairs and approach the door alone. And so, with no backup whatsoever, the pressure of her friend's life on her shoulders, the police officers talking in her ear, and the hundreds of thousands of people watching at home, she felt as if she had no choice but to walk up those stairs step by step, until she stood just feet away from the door, where she waited to see Eloa. Though when the door was opened, she was instead met with the sight of Lindenberg, who reached out his arms, grabbed Nayara's hand, and pulled her inside, shutting the door behind them.
Of course.
And with that, Nayara was a hostage.
Again.
Yet again.
Are we? I'm so tight. I'm ready for this to
be over.
To be over. I ain't never been so ready for a video to be over.
Boy.
I'm tight. Like, what is happening?
Ain't no way y'all can be that dumb. Come on. Like, who who hired?
Like,
I want to say who raised y'all, who hired y'all,
like,
who taught y'all how to be a police.
Thought that was a good idea. Like, are we? I'm so confused.
Bruh, he just baited y'all for another hostage. He set her free.
It's like, why? This
and
girl
got her
at
right
home.
back. Ain't bothering nobody.
Like, trying to
decompress everything
that just happened, and
then he got two revolvers in that mug.
On top of that, knowing that her friend is still in this situation,
and she know how this dude is too. And that's why she said, "Are you calm?"
Once more. This whole sequence has to be one of the worst handlings of a hostage situation that I've ever seen. Even having Nayara at the scene to begin with was questionable enough. As remember, she was only 15 years old at the time, and she had just survived this traumatic experience only one day before. But sending her up there alone, with no form of protection, is shocking. And you might think that after all of this, the news stations would finally just back off and stop intruding on the case, as clearly things were becoming more and more dire.
This just
However,
made more
they
interesting.
only became more obsessed, as Nayara's recapture only boosted their ratings even higher and garnered the case a whole new level of notoriety that they just needed to exploit. And so, these reporters began calling the unit repeatedly, doing anything they could in an attempt to speak to Lindenberg. Though even when he wouldn't answer, they would still try to speak to him directly over their broadcast.
Porque a gente podia, quem sabe, aproveitar esse momento que a gente sabe que os três estão assistindo aqui o programa e eles estão bem, que assim que o Lindenberg ele confirmou isso aqui para nossa produção, eles estão bem, estão tranquilos, estão só esperando o momento certo, pedir para uma das meninas, quem sabe, ou ele mesmo, desse um sinal agora aqui na janela para mostrar para todo mundo que está tudo bem, que está ok e que essa história vai acabar o mais rápido que todo mundo espera. Se os três puderem, um deles dar um sinal, acenar, fazer alguma coisa para mostrar para todo mundo, para deixar todo mundo mais calmo.
Instructing him to give specific signals to show that he was hearing them. Both the media and Lindenberg were stretching his 15 minutes of fame for as long as they possibly could. And by that Friday, the ordeal would reach its 100th hour, making it the most prolonged hostage crisis in Brazil's entire history, with there being no sign of a resolution in sight. And it was obvious that this longevity was weighing heavily on Lindenberg, whose fiery persona had eventually turned into despondency as he grew more and more exhausted, with his words alluding to the possibility that he was finally going to snap.
Y'all gotta also realize, man, this man is doing this stuff for how many days? They're barely eating. He's not getting any sleep.
That's even...
And when you're not getting sleep like that, your mind ain't even really being able to, you know what I'm saying? So when somebody with the temper, with a quick trigger the way he is, the lack of sleep is only going to make it worse.
Yep.
Now y'all done gave him 2 hostages. He understands how smart he is. He's smarter than all y'all. At this moment. He's not answering the phone, but he knows y'all are desperate for his attention. Where y'all are talking to him through the TV. Yeah. He's outsmarting everyone right now. And they just they just keep falling for it, bro.
But everybody that's
This whole-
involved, y'all can't put y'all brains together and
This
come up
is
with
sad.
with a plan to like a good plan that y'all are not broadcasting on the news for him to know your next move. Like, nothing makes sense.
But at the end of the day, honestly, this look like 3 different news stations we done seen. All of them are selfish.
Mas por que isso, cara?
Porque eu não vou sair daqui pra ir pra cadeia, não. Tô sentindo esse coração agora. Tem um cara aí pra população que tá chegando assim, né?
And by this point, Brazilian officials were tired.
He telling y'all he ain't going to jail. And you ask him, why is that, man? That's the wrong thing to say. That's the wrong say. Yeah, man, we're gonna talk about it. We're gonna see what we can do for you to make sure you get the proper help you deserve. Jail time is proper help too. I just need to get you on my side to do what's best for her. Well, both of them now, because you done put both of them back in a damn situation.
Tired of their negotiations anyway, and knew that it was time for a different tactic, sending in their Special Tactical Actions Group, known as GATE. Although, due to the cameras on the scene, the team knew that they couldn't just scale up the wall and enter through the window, since Lindenberg would be able to see the whole thing unfolding on his TV. And anytime he would go to the window, he used Eloa as a human shield, meaning that any plan to shoot him from long range without risking the life of Eloa was nearly impossible. There was really only one way in: the front door, with their plan being to set a charge and breach said door should Lindenberg's behavior escalate, with the camera showing the entirety of the setup. At one point, they even captured the team secretly raising up a gun to one of the officers, despite the officers telling Lindenberg that there were going to be no guns involved, though their cover was clearly blown. And so, the charge was set, and the streets fell silent.
The news, everybody in the news should be held responsible for this, if whatever happens.
As all of Brazil watched on, waiting to see what would happen next.
Na tarde de hoje, documento foi entregue, também colete.
Minuto ao senhor, doutor.
Nós estamos assistindo ritual, o ritual final desse episódio, o ritual que precede a libertação das 2 reféns, das 2 adolescentes, e a entrega, barulho lá no local.
Aconteceu disparo, Percival.
Barulho, exatamente, barulho de disparo. Houve disparo lá dentro.
Aconteceu.
Agora foi.
It all happened in the blink of an eye, as in an instant, Gate would blow open the door, which was followed by a puff of smoke and 4 loud gunshots. The scene is hectic for a minute, until suddenly, we see Nayara stumble out of the door, bleeding heavily from her face, where she falls into the arms of an officer.
Is she okay?
Then, a stretcher is taken into and out of the room, with Eloa strapped to it.
She gone. Y'all ain't shit. They would have been able to fully get this whole situation if it wasn't for the news broadcaster. Y'all made it impossible.
I'm like, do y'all want them to be come out of the situation safe, alive? I'm confused. It's all
This
it
making
seemed like
me
everyone
angry,
was just
bro.
hey, the ratings are up. We're good. We don't really
getting
care.
attention.
We got this big story. We getting all this. That should have been. Child, come on.
As she's rushed down the stairs and taken into an ambulance. And even at this point, these news crews just couldn't help themselves as they stuck their cameras in the window of that very same ambulance, where rescue workers were desperately trying to save Eloa's life. In the fray, Lindenberg had been struck by a rubber bullet and pulled from the unit where police piled on top of him, thus finally bringing the crisis to an end. but not before he would fire his weapon 3 times. One shot would hit Nayara's hand, with a bullet traveling directly through it and then striking her in the face, while Iloa was struck twice, once in the groin and once directly in the head. Despite being given immediate medical attention, Iloa Pimentel fell into a coma, and though she fought bravely for many days, she was eventually pronounced brain dead, before she would ultimately pass away. Her funeral was held days later, where over 30,000 people would pay their respects for the girl whose kidnapping many had watched on their household TVs. In the days that followed, Nayara would make a full recovery, and she would later go on to speak out about her story and how she was pressured by law enforcement to revisit the scene that day, with her accounts leading to heavy criticism against the officers who were working her case. And it wasn't just for that reason either, as her testimony also exposed just how poorly planned out Gates' entry of the home actually was. According to officials, the team only entered the building because they had heard a gunshot, claiming that Lindenberg had fired first, which prompted them to react. Though it's evident from the footage at the scene and from Nayara's own testimony that this actually wasn't the case, and Lindenberg had only begun shooting as a result of that door being blown open. And making things even more troubling, despite blowing the door open, it took officers as long as 7 to 15 seconds to enter the apartment, a time span in which Lindenberg would fire all 3 of his shots.
Damn,
it's unclear why they hesitated for so long before they entered the home, but they must have known that the blast was going to trigger some sort of reaction from Lindenberg, and their decision not only to breach the door in that manner, but also their decision to wait, undoubtedly contributed to the death of Iloa. And truthfully, it's a miracle that Nayara wasn't killed as well, due to their incompetence. Though obviously, it wasn't just law enforcement who had failed Iloa in the situation, with many pointing their fingers at members of the media, especially those who directly interfered with the situation, as their behavior undoubtedly factored into Lindenberg's behavior. Though despite this, none of the journalists ever expressed any regret over their handling of the situation, and to my knowledge, none of them faced any form of repercussions. As a result of his many crimes, Lindenberg would be sentenced to 90+ years in prison, though due to Brazilian law, the sentence was reduced to just 30 years, making it likely that he will someday be released from prison. Which, for now, brings us to the end of this tragic story. Though there is one more detail about this case that I just had to mention at the end here, because it somehow makes this story even more bizarre, as just days after Iloa's death, her father Aldo would disappear.
Who was Douglas then?
Throughout the entire hostage crisis, Aldo was essentially invisible to the public, as the press was forbidden from interviewing any of Iloa's family. But as a result of Nayara's recapture, Aldo had become so stressed that he collapsed and was rushed to the hospital. There, he would make a full recovery, but when he was carried away from the scene, the cameras would capture his image as he lay on a stretcher, with the photo being broadcast all over the news that day, where a detective at home just so happened to recognize him. As it turns out, Aldo was a wanted man, having been accused of murdering at least 2 people back in the 90s as part of a Brazilian gang, one of which was even a police chief. And from that moment, he had been on the run ever since, with Aldo actually being an alias for his real name, Everaldo. During this whole situation, Iloa's father was quite literally a killer on the run, and he had been blending into his new life for over a decade, until the moment his face was broadcast all over Brazil, which in turn caused him to flee the area immediately after. Though eventually, after a full year later, Everaldo would finally be captured and sent to prison, marking the end of one of the most shocking television cases we've ever explored, and what may very well be the darkest moment in television history.
Wow. That's the real reason why he passed out. It ain't had nothing to do with his daughter. It was the fact that, damn, y'all finna catch me. Because of all this publicity.
That probably was a mixture of everything. But this was crazy. And rest in peace
to Loa.
Yeah, cause
man, you know how many adults failed her?
And for people, even in the end, to not even give two, like, else about, like, show no, like, oh, we don't care. We got our story. We did what we, you know. I mean, I don't know, man.
No, say what you should say.
No, I'm about to say, I get, you know, for them, like, they don't care. It's not like it's their family or their situation or they're in it. They like, oh, we did our job, we got our story, and that's all we care about. So
got our ratings.
Sadly, and I'm trying to figure out why I took y'all after y'all blew the door off. Y'all should have, like, within seconds something can happen. So for y'all to hesitate that long, what was?
Cause what y'all think he was gonna shoot at y'all? Like, y'all was never his target. His target, literally, he got 2 shots off at her, and then immediately pointed the gun at the other one.
So sad. But yeah, everybody felt them. Most definitely. Every single person. Law enforcement, the media, the little reporters that call it, all of y'all. But yeah. I have nothing more to say.
Man, y'all spam us up in the comments, man. Let us know you all thoughts and opinions about it for us in the comment section, man. But until next time, y'all know how it go, man. I do go by the name DJ New Kid. This is
Sierra Nicole.
We are.
We
out.
Got a stack of flip for my folks. Dollar. Please tell me you can hear me. Don't turn your back and don't neglect me. Just let me know if you need me. Dollar.